Coming up, escaped Decepticons, kaiju, zombies, missing airplanes. There's so much going on in these first 3 episodes of Masterforce, and we're going to start on this series right now on Transformers University. Hello, my friend, and welcome to episode number 146 of Transformers University. I am your host, Anthony Brucali, owner-operator, madman behind TFU.INFO, the website, the toy archive, this podcast, TFU News and Views podcast, and so much more. I want to welcome you to a new phase in this show, a new phase in this series. A couple episodes ago, we wrapped up Transformers Headmasters, which is the first of 3 full-length Japanese series that continued the story of Generation 1 in Japan. Very different than what happened in the West and in the United States. And Masterforce, or Super-God Masterforce, which is the full title, we'll call it Masterforce for short, is the second of those 3 series. And if you took the journey with me on Headmasters, the show I had never watched really in seriousness prior to doing this podcast and doing those episodes, you'll know that I didn't love Headmasters. It wasn't a fun show to watch. And I have to say, watching the first 3 episodes of Masterforce, it's a different vibe altogether. The show isn't necessarily fun. The show is actually very serious, but it's really well done, at least as far as the first 3 episodes go. And we'll get into them. Now, before we get into Masterforce, I just want to remind you, patreon.com/TFU.INFO. It is the best place to get in touch with me. It is the place where I'm sharing the most of my fandom and my Transformers thoughts on the latest news and what's going on with everything with the brand Transformers 1, my thoughts on the trailer, and just even my thoughts on some of the stuff we're talking about in this episode today. In fact, right after I finished the first episode of Masterforce, I went right to my Patreon and I was like, I got to talk about this. I got to give you guys a preview of what I'm going to record in a few days. So check it out, patreon.com/TFU.INFO, all one word, and join up. It's free to join up and get occasional updates from me. It's $1 a month if you want to get every update from me and get early access to the podcast. And then it goes up from there, and then you can even get your name read on the show. So with that, let's jump into the episode. One of the things I want to lay down as part of the ground rules for us watching Masterforce all the way through is that I'll be using the dubbed versions, which came out in Singapore, I believe. I did a whole episode on Omni Productions, and right now I'm blanking on exactly where maybe Indonesia, where those came out from. But regardless, the Omni Productions dubs use the Western names, and the series in Japan has a lot of the Western toys, but not the Western characters. So while the soundbites you may hear from the show use the Western names, I will be using the Japanese character names because they're essentially different characters. And we won't get to it in these 3 episodes, but most commonly is Optimus Prime, right? So he is not Convoy in the series. He is a Jinrai. And Jinrai is a different character than Optimus Prime, even though he looks like Optimus Prime in the toy, or at least a similar version of the same toy was sold in the US and in Europe as Power Master Optimus Prime. But Power Master Optimus Prime and Jinrai are not the same character. So just keep that in mind, especially when we start playing sound bites from the series. So with that, let's get into the first episode of Super-God Masterforce, episode number 1, Rise Up Pretenders. It's the actual title. That's what Shout Factory called it. And it aired April 12th, 1988, barely 2 weeks after the finale of Headmasters. So not a big gap between the end of Headmasters and the beginning of Masterforce in Japan. So not a long time to wait for that next iteration of Transformers. And this show really does have a very different tone, very different storytelling style, and very different pacing. Things that I was all kind of bummed out about watching Headmasters. But we'll start with a brand new theme song.
誰にも止められない命かけたトランスフォーム傷ついてもやるしか
And as you can see, right, the theme song's even kind of laid back, right? It's not that intense in your face Headmaster's theme song. In the video itself, actually, that accompanies the theme song, shows the cast, and you'll notice there is a large human cast. And I'm saying that with air quotes, though you can't see me on the podcast. It feels like a very 80s TV series opening. I mean, it's like this actor plays this guy, and you're seeing it in this opening. You'll see a lot of the cast, and a lot of the cast that hasn't even shown up yet. But we'll start on a boat in Canada. I'm on a boat! If we learned anything from the Headmaster's finale, it's don't be on a boat in a Japanese Transformers series. Okay, this is more of a cruise ship, and it's a quiet night until the Decepticons attack. Blood, or you may know him as Bomb Burst in the Pretender line, but from here we will call him Blood. Blood attacks the captain of the ship. Gilmer, as you know as Submarauder, attacks a couple on the deck, and the sight of him somehow causes the man's eyeglasses to just shatter on their own. And I say eyeglasses and not glasses because I learned this the hard way. I'm going to tell you a story about how I learned to use the phrase eyeglasses the hard way. Sophomore year, high school English, we read To Kill a Mockingbird, and on the test that we took, you'll always remember this, Mrs. Jones, Francis Lewis High School, 1990, sophomore year, I've been probably early 94. She gave a test on To Kill a Mockingbird, and there's a scene in To Kill a Mockingbird where Atticus Finch fires his gun and breaks his eyeglasses. I wrote on the test glasses, as did about 3/4 of the class, and we all got it wrong. And that actually put me from being an honors level English student to being a non-honors level English student, something I could not do or get back into from that point on. So yeah, so that's one I always remember from high school, and something to keep in mind. When you're talking about glasses, it's probably better to say eyeglasses because someone might just be a stickler for it. Now, noticing here in this show, the Pretender shells are slightly larger than a normal human, and we'll get into that a bit. They're like NBA player size, maybe like a pro wrestler size. But we don't just have Pretenders. We have Seacons as well. Scalor, as you know in the U.S., known as Gulf or Galf, depending on how you translate it. They are also, before I forget, Seacons are drones and troop builders in Masterforce. So a couple of Gulf drones attack the hull of the ship. They sink the ship and set it on fire, just for good measure. And then here is where we get the title screen. And does Omni Productions get the title right?
The Return of the Decepticons!
Of course they don't. So now we'll cut to daytime. There's some kids playing soccer. Soccer tends to be a theme through some of these episodes. Shoot a Go is his name. He scores. We'll meet him in a bit. And we also meet Metal Hawk, who is referred to as Hawk in the dub, and Shoota's dad, Professor Go. They talk a little bit about Shoota and how he looks up to Metal Hawk, and then Diver, a.k.a. Wave Rider in the West, calls in to Metal Hawk on his watch and reports about the ship as they are driving. They go to what appears to be a planetarium, a lab, and Metal Hawk watches video of the Decepticon attack. Then Shoota gets home from soccer on his motorcycle, and Metal Hawk reveals some important information.
The fact is, I'm not a human being.
Then outside and into nightfall, Metal Hawk explains even more.
I came from a planet called Autobot, which is far away from here. To put it correctly, I'm an extraterrestrial being, which is a transformation of a robot.
You, Hook? A robot?
That's right. I guess you can call us that. Back in the Stone Age, when human beings were still living in caves, we had arrived on this planet, the planet Earth, which holds so many mysteries. At that time, we were in the middle of a battle with the evil Decepticons. Our battleship was pursuing the enemy warship, and while attempting to land on Earth, we had an accident. We lost our battleship, and we were stranded here. So, in order to survive, we had to transform ourselves into human form to adapt to the environment and our circumstances. In the confusion, many of us were lost, and now I can only identify 4 of us. We were able to triumph over the Decepticons, and we managed to seal them up. But apparently it seems that they have finally escaped.
Planet Autobot? Seal them up? What are they talking about? Now, I was really confused when I first watched this, but we're going to actually learn a bit more. Maybe not about Planet Autobot, but we will learn a bit about sealing up the Decepticons in the next few episodes. Now, elsewhere, we have 2 more Seacons, this time Tentacles, named both the same in both the West and in Japan. They attack along with some Gulf drones. So those Gulf drones, they attack some seaside warehouses at night, and Japan sends helicopters to fight them, which I guess makes sense because they're probably used to fighting kaiju. The Gulf drones shoot them down. There's no parachutes from the helicopters, so this show does seem to get somewhat violent. And then we hit this commercial break, and we get some new bumpers. And so the bumpers are of Metal Hawk 2 break, and then King Poseidon, a.k.a. Piranacon, coming back from break. The attack continues into the daytime. We hear a little bit more about the tentacles and their sounds. And here's what it sounds like. And to my ear, it sounds a lot like if in the U.S. back in 2004 or late 2003, Howard Dean, who was, I believe, a representative in Congress, was the front runner for the Democratic nomination for president, and he gave this big, like, rousing speech, and it became kind of like a pro wrestler rant.
We're going to California and Texas and New York, and we're going to South Dakota and Oregon and Washington and Michigan, and then we're going to Washington, D.C. to take back the White House.
And then he gave this big yeah at the end that sounds like this, which to my ear sounds a lot like the tentacle sound. So we'll play a little game throughout the rest of this part of the episode. Tentacle or Howard Dean? You be the judge. So as the attack continues into daytime, Doros, a.k.a. Skullgrin, joins in. He wants Metal Hawk to kind of come out of the shadows and reveal himself. The tanks are no match for those tentacles. And then news reaches Hawk, or Metal Hawk, and he uses his bracelet to transform. And we see his shell for the first time. Shooter then arrives on his motorcycle, and Metal Hawk reveals his robot form. You know, in the dub, he calls out Pretender. In Japan, the Japanese language, it is suit on. And now here is where we get the big roll call. So Metal Hawk converts to his jet mode. He radios to Diver. Diver calls on his Pretender. A dolphin leaps out of the water in front of his shell and then dives back in, and it's his robot form somehow. I don't know where the dolphin times in, but it's a bizarre piece of animation. He then turns into his boat mode and radios Lander, aka Landmine, who is in New York.
Oh, something came up. Looks like the enemies have finally made a move.
Hey, darling, are you coming or not?
So Lander ditches his date, and then Phoenix, aka Cloudburst, is also apprised of the situation. He is stationed in Germany, which is only according to the Omnidub, and flies towards Japan. Tentacles are still attacking. And then Metal Hawk arrives. Decepticon Pretenders watch as Metal Hawk fights Tentacle. And then Shooter arrives in the city on his motorcycle. He watches the fight and then gets grabbed by another Tentacle. Metal Hawk gets shot in the back, and we go to commercial. And again, the commercial breaks have 2 more bumpers. This time we have going to break, we have Super Jinrai, and coming back from break, we have Go Shooter. And if you've heard me say Shoota most of this time, Shoota Go, you'll realize that is where part of this story is going. Now, I also should say that they always shout Masterforce going to and from break, and it sounds a little like this.
Masterforce!
Now, Metal Hawk is fighting 2-on-1. He bisects one of the tentacles. And then Doros joins the battle in robot form, and Metal Hawk has some observations.
It's you again.
Metal Hawk, also a fan of the theme from Webster.
It was you, then came you.
You ran me right in like center at home.
Never thought forever was the best I could do.
Then came you.
Now, the other Decepticons reveal their robot forms, and we learn some interesting information.
How did you get out?
We have a score to settle. Do you know what it's like to be locked away for thousands of years? Well, today you're gonna pay for what you did to us, Hook.
It was my duty to stop you destroying the Earth.
Okay, let's not waste time. Come on, fight. Your time has finally come.
Thousands of years, but that implies that they had gotten out. I have lots of questions, and we'll get some answers as we go. Also, the TF Wiki says this takes place in the far-flung future of 2020, which was retconned into the canon in 2019. So this is all during the COVID pandemic. So nobody wearing masks, except maybe Metal Hawk. Metal Hawk fights 3-on-1 now, all roughly human-sized pretenders, and he is losing. While on the ground, Gilmer has a message.
Say your last prayers, Hook, 'cause you're gonna die!
Of our own arrogance, Gilmer, a big bad religion fan. Phoenix then arrives and shoots Gilmer, and then Phoenix and Blood have a dogfight, and now we have planes fighting planes. The other Autobots arrive. Lander tackles Daros, and we have some tanks fighting tanks. And then Tentakill still has Shuta in his hand. Gilmer threatens him at gunpoint, and Diver sneaks up behind him and punches Gilmer. And they will end up fighting boats versus boats. Never really thought of the Pretenders this way. I guess maybe because not having Metal Hawk in this context doesn't really help on the Western side, but they line up pretty nicely in terms of one air, one land, one sea on each side. And to me, this makes the Pretender alt modes make way more sense. So we go back to the Metal Hawk fight. So was that Tentakill or Howard Dean? You'll have to figure it out. Metal Hawk cleaves off Tentakill's tentacle and saves Shuta, and then jams his sword in the other Tentakill's head, and it explodes. The Decepticons call for a retreat. The Autobots and Shuta stare into the sunset, and Metal Hawk rallies his troops.
Although the Decepticons have left us now, yet one thing is certain. We'll hear from them again. But as long as we're still here, we'll fight. Justice will prevail. We must never submit to evil powers, otherwise we are doomed. No matter what it costs, we shall fight on. We must preserve peace for Earth and its people. And to do that, we must all work together. Remember that.
This speech is very different in Japan, and I'm just going to read what TF Wiki has because it kind of sums it up a lot better than I can. And he says, as the sun begins to set, the Pretenders tell Shuta the rest of their story. When they first encountered humans, all those thousands of years ago, all they saw were small, frail beings. But when they discovered their ability to feel love, their compassion for others, and their indomitable courage, they were so shocked to find these qualities in such beings that they too decided to become humans. Taught by mankind that strength alone is not enough, the Autobot Pretenders have vowed to protect the Earth against the threat of the Decepticons. So very different connotation there than what's provided in the Omni dub. Also gives us a little bit more backstory as to how long the Autobots have been there. That puts the Autobots on Earth, the Pretender Autobots on Earth, as far back as the Stone Age, which is the Neolithic era, about 7000 BC to 1700 BC. And somehow the Autobots developed this ability to transform into humans. These are all really interesting pieces to this series that have not really been explored before. As the Autobots return to their human forms in the closing sequence, we get like this really interesting walk-away section where each human is shown with their robot version. Phoenix, by the way, Cloudburst, looks a lot like Wolverine. He's got this big, tall hair, and he's got a bomber jacket, which, they've tried to theme these guys up to be thematically in line with their alt modes. And finally, the narrator wraps everything else up for us.
It has been several thousand years since the Decepticons lost the battle to the Autobots and were locked away. But today they've escaped and another battle threatens. Come together, warriors of righteousness, Autobots, ready for the battle!
We get the final commercial bumper, and that is Blood, the Pretender known as Bombburst in the West. We've seen a little bit of him in this episode. And that ends the first episode of Masterforce. And I have to say, the show itself impressed me right off the bat. The theming here, the way the characters line up, the smaller cast is going to be interesting, at least for a little while until until it gets big again. The pacing is so much better than Headmasters. I don't feel like I'm jumping from exposition base to Earth to Cybertron to whatever planet they're on this week, fighting whatever Decepticon toy they need to introduce. All of it works really, really well in this small group context. And we'll see the cast expand as we get a little further out. And by the end of this episode, we'll at least have 2 more very important characters to talk about. You know, one more thing just to quickly talk about on episode 1 and just the layout of Masterforce is that the title sequence doesn't happen at the beginning of the show. It's not that first thing you get when you get past the theme song. There's a bit of a cold open that lasts various amounts of times, depending on these episodes, before we get to that title of the episode. Now, episode number 2, Terror, the Decepticons Manhunt, originally aired April 19th, 1988. And, of course, the Omni Productions version, probably a little on the nose.
The hunt for the living dead.
And if you're watching this on the Shout Factory version, episode 2 is actually called Terror, the Decepticons' Fearsome Manhunt. And this episode starts with a quick check-in with reporter Jay Medgill.
Early this morning, 10 cadavers from the University Hospital were found to have been stolen. According to a watchman who was on the scene at the time, the people who stole the bodies had strange masks on. This is a drawing from the watchman's description.
Now, there's a lot going on during Jay Medgill's report because there's a pan of multiple TV screens, one of which has an ad for a movie called Gomola, Gomola. It looks like a Rambo-style movie. I don't know who Gomola is, but I'm a little bummed that we've never seen him since in some sort of weird background character. And so the drawings that Jay Medgill is referring to at the end of that soundbite look a lot like Doris and Gilmer. The Decepticons are imbuing living corpses with evil energy from a mysterious globe. And we'll get into that globe as this series goes on. They're making zombies. And we find out actually these zombies are called Destroids. And what do they do with the zombies? Well, make them attack New York, of course. But thankfully in New York, we've got Lander. And he stops them. Elsewhere, Metalhawk and Dr. Go receive word from Lander. Dr. Go asks the question that we've all been thinking.
If those Decepticons have been buried for centuries, how can they come to life now?
I'm very concerned about this, so I've made some checks.
Oh?
Something else has happened as well. The 3 places that we buried them in were first the pyramids, second the deepest part of the Atlantic, and the third place the Nazca Plain in Peru. Well, a strange phenomena has been occurring at all 3 places simultaneously.
Phenomena?
Phenomena. Do, 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 do. So Metalhawk thinks the Decepticons came back at the same time to conquer Earth. Now, in the Japanese language version of this, they outline the places a little clearer. The places were the pyramids in Egypt. And the fact that no one, thought when Headmasters was in Egypt all those times, yes, Egypt, that maybe there might have disturbed one of the pretenders in hiding. The Nazca lines of Peru and the city of Atlantis, which we also saw at the end of Headmasters. And also in the Japanese language version, Dr. Go uses the phrase that he wants to, quote, use them. And I don't think we'll find out what them are this episode, but we'll get into it by the end of this particular Masterforce episode. The Decepticons, they decide to kidnap live humans as they feel the energy might work better on them. In the ocean, Diver sees a ship get attacked. What did I just say? Don't be on a ship in a Japanese Transformers TV series. It's just not a good idea. Metalhawk gets ready to go. Shuda wants to go along with him, and eventually Shuda convinces him to let him tag along. Blood has been watching this entire time and has now realized he has found the Autobot headquarters. In the jungle, the mighty jungle, we meet Prince Cab, and he is talking to animals.
Say hi to your mother for me, all right?
Now, Prince Cab is on this island where the Decepticons are looking to pick up some live humans, and Doris arrives with some Lobclaw drones to kidnap him, but...
God damn it! It's the Autobots again!
Metalhawk drops off Shuda and goes to fight the Lobclaws. Doros then finds Shuda. Metalhawk destroys the Seacons, and Daros flees. Some overbite drones also arrive and kidnap some humans from the island. The Autobots find Cab, and his guardian, Donk, doesn't believe Cab that these are robots on the beach because the Autobots are now in their human forms. And Cab, being frustrated about not being believed, runs away in anger. Metalhawk sends Phoenix and Diver out to scout, and Shoot goes and finds Cab. Cab thinks he's a robot and attacks him. And then there's some kind of like kid playground kind of fighting, and then there's an armadillo that turns into a ball, and Shoot kind of does some soccer moves with him, and then laughs at Cab because Cab doesn't know what soccer is. And then Shoot and Cab end up talking until a bird arrives, and Cab understands it, of course, as it tells of danger on the island and possible Decepticons being there.
Say hi to your mother for me, okay?
And Cab, being the prince of the island, goes to defend his land. Shuda goes and tells the Autobots. Somehow Cab is now in the water on a canoe, and he is attacked and captured by an overbite drone. At the base, Blood attacks the Autobot headquarters, the planetarium thing that we saw in the previous episode, with a bunch of lob claws. Diver reports Cab's capture, and on the beach, Cab escapes his Decepticon captors just as the Autobots attack. A fight happens, the Autobots win, the Decepticons flee, the humans flee, and Donk wants Cab to go with the Autobots to Japan. Lander then reports in on the base attack. Everything is on fire, and then Blood finds Lander and attacks him. Just then, Dr. Go arrives as well, and a column from the base falls Dr. Go during the attack. And then the base explodes, and Blood flees. The Autobot team returns to the base, and Shuda looks for his dad. The Autobots rescue Lander from the rubble, and then eventually Shuda and the Autobots find Dr. Go, and he is not in good shape. Dr. Go is going to be Dr. Went in a couple of minutes, and he gives his son some final advice.
I will be with you, but don't be sad. You must have the courage to face the challenges, son. You must be strong, my boy. You're the head of the family now.
And as Dr. Go dies, he hands Shuda a key, and in the Japanese version, he says, use them. We find out that the key is not what they're using, but it is a nice little red herring in a lot of ways. We have an epilogue where the Autobots build a new base, and Cab joins the team, and we see Cab holding a soccer ball and handing it to Shuda. So we see that friendship starting to build. We see some of the storytelling techniques really get kind of mature for a show like this, where things are a little bit more subtle, things are a little bit more visual. Things aren't necessarily smacking you over the head the way they are in Headmasters. And I have to say, I really, really like it. And we're going to one more episode of Masterforce to talk about, and then we'll sum up for the day. But first, give this a listen. Hey, want to help out this podcast or the website TFU.INFO? There's a number of ways you can do it. Let me tell you how. You can help us directly by joining our Patreon and enrolling as a student at Transformers University. There, you'll get early access to the podcast as well as exclusive behind-the-scenes peeks and perks for as little as $1 a month. Sign up is quick and easy. Just swing on by to www.patreon.com/TFU.INFO. Another way you can help us is by using our Amazon link, www.tfu.info/Amazon. Type that into your browser whenever you want to shop at Amazon, and a portion of what you spend will be contributed back to us. It's that easy. Finally, you don't become the world's longest running transforming toy archive without some help from other fans. We're always on the hunt for photos of figures and accessories we're missing from our pages. If you'd like to contribute, go to tfu.info/help for a list of what we need, or send an email to info@tfu.info. tfu.info, the Alpha Trion and Omega Prime of transforming toys. Now, back to the show. All right, we come back. Episode 3 of Masterforce, Kidnapping. Or actually, it's a question mark. Let's try it again. Kidnapping the Targeted Jumbo Jet. Originally aired April 26th, 1988. Shout Factory version title is the same, and Omni not quite as subtle.
The case of the missing plane.
We start aboard a plane off the coast of London, UK, and there's some purple lightning, and then something out on the wing.
Don't look. He's not there now. He jumps away whenever anyone might see him.
No, not that. No, Mr. Shatner. Not that. It is Flight 308 that we're on, and blood is outside the plane. The plane has some extreme turbulence, and it's actually, I gotta say, it's kind of cool seeing 1980s style planes in animation. It has the center aisle of seats, which you don't really see anymore. So it has there's only 4 seats per row in this, but like older planes in especially in the 80s, the larger planes had two seats against each window, and then either 3 to 5 seats in the middle. And this you're seeing actually 2 aisles, so it's like window, 2 seats, window, aisle, 2 seats, another aisle, 2 seats, another aisle, and then another window seat. All really kind of cool seeing that shown in this episode. And the plane, of course, is being stolen by blood. Elsewhere, Cab talks to animals.
Say hi to your mother for me, okay?
And this time it's his parrot. Shuda is looking for him and finds his treehouse hut, and Cab takes him for a tour. And then Shuda finds Cab's armadillo in his bed again and turns into a soccer ball. The armadillo is kind of a transformer, isn't it? And the boys talk a little bit. Inside Autobot headquarters, Metalhawk gets a report from Lander about the plane. Diver also reports on another jet missing in Corsica, and the Autobots plan to rendezvous. Shuda and Cab, of course, wanting to tag along, talk Metalhawk into just getting them plane tickets to go join them. Not the smartest idea if planes are being stolen, but all right. Metalhawk flies off, and Shuda and Cab take his dirt bike to the airport. Metalhawk finds a plane on the beach. Diver reports no fatalities, but they do have to press a button every 108 minutes. Metalhawk and Diver then become humans and go check in at the hospital. There, they meet Minerva, who is a young girl, and her parents are on the plane. We also find out that her parents are okay. Diver and Metalhawk get info from this young girl, Minerva, and she saw blood. Elsewhere, which we find out is Rome, at a fountain where people are throwing in coins, the Destroid zombies attack right from under the fountain, and they attack Rome. The Decepticons watch this attack and lament not getting the biologist that was aboard the second plane. See you in another life, brother. Lander and Phoenix arrive on the island to meet Cab and Shuda just at the right time. Then all the Autobots meet and deduce that the Destroids are from the first flight, Flight 308. They were dead all along. The kids ordered to stay at the hospital by the Autobots, and the Autobots, instead of trying to shoot the Destroids, use knockout gas, at least that's what the dub calls it, knockout gas, to kind of knock them out and cure them. So they weren't dead all along. This is so confusing. I'll wait for the smoke monster. Now, the Decepticons, they see this happening. They flee. The Autobots follow them. Lander and Diver head underground to see where they went. Back at the hospital, the boys end up meeting Minerva. Then Diver and Lander, underground, hit a dead end. And I realize I'm jumping back and forth here a little bit. There is a commercial break in between part of this here. But back at the hospital, Metalhawk and Phoenix talk with Minerva's dad. He's the biologist that they want, and he is joining others on another flight. Metalhawk and Phoenix decide to also go on that flight. The plane takes off for Japan. And that plane gets attacked by blood. But Metalhawk has a plan.
Siren, Jose, you're in charge now. Okay.
Metalhawk and Phoenix take their shell forms and fight blood. On the plane, we find out one of the stewardesses is a Destroid, and she easily defeats Cab and Shuda and tries to go for the cockpit. Outside, the Autobots dogfight blood and some Krakens, which are sea-wing Seacon drones, and kill the drones. The plane then is crashing as blood flees, and it's rescued by Metalhawk and Phoenix, who each take a wing and fly under it. The plane lands successfully, and the kids talk a bit at the airport. We find out that Minerva is staying in Japan to study, and our narrator wraps things up.
Once again, the danger has been averted. Landmine and Wave Rider, who were unable to track down the Decepticons, are also returning to their base. But one thing is certain, they haven't heard the last of the Decepticons.
And that's it. That's the first 3 episodes of Masterforce. And I got to say, I don't want to gush too much about it because I hate for this show to slow down in pacing, but I really like what we have here so far. We have some really, I don't want to call them dark subjects, but we have a character die in Dr. Go. We have corpses and zombies and plane crashes and helicopters getting shot out of the sky. Like, this was clearly, I feel like, I don't know. I mean, I can't put my finger on it exactly, but I do wonder if the folks who were writing this were deliberately trying to go for an older direction and maybe, in fact, going for the same G1 crowd, but knowing now that they're 10, 11, 12, 13 years old, going for something that might appeal to that demographic instead of dialing backwards and trying to get the next batch of 5-year-olds. So it is kind of interesting to see where and how the show is progressing that is so different than everything we've experienced from Headmasters and everything that we've really experienced from G1 up until this point. So I'm excited. I'm excited to see what the rest of the show is like. The show is very anime. It has a very anime storytelling method, whereas Headmasters felt like it was very disjointed. This feels like it's very, I wouldn't say very continuity driven, but there's still a Monster of the Week vibe to this series, much like with every other Japanese Transformers series I've ever watched. But within the Monster of the Week vibe, which is fine, there does seem to be a longer story that is trending underneath, and I'm interested to see where this goes. Like I said, hopefully they don't drag it out. I won't drag out my praise of these first 3 episodes, and if you haven't watched them, find them online, buy the Shout Factory DVDs. Certainly worth your watching, and certainly worth the time to experience this. It explains to me why Metal Hawk has been such an popular character, and because I never experienced it. I didn't realize he's the Autobot leader in this show until now. So I learned something new. So with that, we are going to take a quick break. And when we come back, we'll talk about what we're going to talk about in episode 147 of Transformers University.
Thanks for listening to the show. Stick around to hear what's coming up next episode. But first, I want to fill you in on a few ways you can stay in touch with the show. Want to be on the show? Leave us a voicemail at 702-763-4838. That's 702-POD-4TFU. Or send an email to info@TFU.INFO. Be sure to catch us on Twitter at TFU_info and on Facebook and Instagram under the username TFU.INFO, all one word. Also, please subscribe to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/TFU.INFO, where we post all of our podcasts, plus special video segments, reviews, and live coverage of Transformers-related events such as New York Toy Fair and New York Comic-Con. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Please visit us at www.tfu.info, the world's longest-running transforming toy archive.
Now, before I get into what we're going to talk about next time on the show, I do want to thank our Patreon seniors and super seniors. The show could not be possible without them. I'm so glad they're part of the show. I'm so glad they've been able to help support the show. And so, with that, I want to thank Alex Mendoza, Jay Soups, Jacob Owen Lucha, Paul Heel, Eric Sire, John Forex Levengood, and Sean Hamilton. Thank you all for being a part of this show and for supporting the show the way you have. All right, so next time on the show, I promised you what I'd talk about next time on the show, and I'll tell you right now what it is. The Adventures of Dr. Wendt. No. Next time on the show, we're staying with Masterforce. We're not going to do another batch of episodes just yet, but we are going to talk about the soundtrack, just like we did with Headmasters and Transformers the movie and the Transformers the movie score and all that stuff. We are going to talk about the soundtrack for Masterforce, and it's available free online. I'll tell you how to get to it next time on the show. So I want to thank you for joining me. If you want to keep up with me online, the best place to do it right now is Patreon. I think my Patreon students really do get the most from me right now, and that is patreon.com/TFU.INFO. I share a lot of little things going on, things I've been watching, Transformers stuff related, my thoughts on the latest news. A lot of the times we're developing a great community there. You can join for free and get an update every now and again. You can join for as little as $1 a month and get all of my updates as they come through. And there are bigger and better perks as you move up through the tiers. And of course, the senior and super senior folks get thanked right here on the show, as you just heard. Elsewhere, you can keep up with me: Blue Sky, Threads, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, all the socials. I do post there on occasion. And I want to thank you for joining the show. So once again, I am your host, Anthony Brucali, owner-operator, madman behind TFU.INFO. Until next time, see ya.